And we're live. We're going to be kind of picking up a little bit of where we left off last time in a way, because we were getting on the edge of talking about spiritual anarchy and those things, and we're just going to kind of riff on that and the case against God. Okay, so the case against God. By God, in the first way that we're going to talk about it, I mean the monotheistic version of God. Hello, Romstead. And by my way of thinking, these are all the people of the book. This would be the God of the book, right? Judaism, Islam, Christianity, they all have the same beginning myths. They all have the same um, God, essentially. Hey, Black Unigriffin, good to see you. The drink tonight is a little bit of absolute vodka and some juice. We'll see how that goes. It tastes pretty good. Hello, my love. So yeah, we're gonna be talking about case against God and the case for spiritual anarchy. Now, like I said in the last slide, all of these monotheistic religions start with somebody having a vision and creating a religion, right? This is unlike your more pagan religions, where these things evolved over time with an interaction with the world. And they discovered or invented gods for different aspects of reality. You have these monotheistic religions that have God, that he went and told somebody, supposedly, and they went and told everybody else, hey, God says that I'm special and that I should do this and that. First off, like I said last time, in all reality, all of these religions are inherently undemocratic. Christianity, you got King of Kings, Lord of Lords. You've got all these religions are designed to reinforce hierarchy. They are all religions where God is on top and you are subservient to God. You are subservient to God, the angels, and everything is essentially God's property. We are all possessions of a greater being. Now, that in and of itself rubs me wrong personally. Immediately, I have a problem with that. That being said, I do have a lot to say on Christianity because I was Christian for a while there. Like, I had the Manitou stuff that's always been going on, but at the age of 5, I met a pretty girl that told me about this Christianity stuff at a Baptist church, and they gave me a little uniform and told me I was smart for memorizing verses and stuff like that. And I fell for it for quite a while. From 5 till about 15, I was very much into the Christian faith. I was actually being groomed to be a preacher. In fact, even after I quit, I actually was contacted about a full ride scholarship to Pensacola Christian College. Now, there were a few things in the church itself that were problematic as well. To this day, I can't stand sweet pickles because of how the church treated me. That flavor makes me think of what it was like when they were good to me. Because even then, I had the long hair, I talked like a hippie. So the other church people didn't really like me very much, like the other kids and stuff, until I started winning stuff for them, right? Like the time with the sweet pickle, I had actually won this, like, they called it Awana Olympics. It's like a kids thing. Anyways, I'd won the whole thing for him. I was all excited about it, and then just as I'm all excited about it, I get this pickle or a hot dog, and I tasted sweet pickle relish for the first time, and that flavor. That's the way that people treated me. But that's the religion itself. Um, the people. There was all kinds of racist things going on that I didn't catch on to at the time because I was little and didn't understand. I didn't understand race very well at that age. That's a whole nother story. We might talk about some of that stuff at some point because there are things to talk about there. But the whole thing, all of it was hierarchy. Even in the church, you had your elders, you had the deacons, you had the preacher himself. The whole thing is built on a hierarchical structure. And this, to me, is diametrically opposed to the nature of spirit, right? To the nature of magic. This is something that has to come from within. Power, like I said in the last video, power comes from within. And, you know, I see all kinds of people pray and nothing happens. There are exceptions to this. There are people that pray and it works. And you get your group prayers, but that says something right there, right? That group prayers work better than individual prayers. That right there says something. And what it says is that when you get more than one person focusing on a goal, sync together, it creates more power. It creates a larger field. And so, where the hell's God? If God's so powerful, why do we need to have larger groups of people to make a prayer have any chance of succeeding? It's absurd. It doesn't work, right? And part of the problem here, I mean, at some point in this live, we are going to talk about my unverified personal gnosis of the Horde and what they did to the being that was behind all this. But even in that, there's like different wearable tulpas that he's wearing. And the problem here, okay, and this is also, or if I'm completely wrong, then this was either his vulnerability or just the fact of why he doesn't work, is that it doesn't resonate properly. It doesn't make sense. The dots aren't connected. You have to look away from the truth to be able to believe the full thing. That's why they have so many thought canceling cliches like God works in mysterious ways. It's the will of God. Things like that. Because if you look too closely, the answers stop coming. It can no longer be explained. It gets to a point where it doesn't make any sense. And so the backstory is bad. All right, that's what I'm talking about in that short where I say that the new myths, or that the old legends have been stripped bare and the new myths are dying from the hollowness of their own themes, because there's nothing truly beautiful in the idea of big sky daddy that owns everybody and takes care of you. I mean, yes, you can feel a peace in obedience, right? Happiness in slavery. But that's not really beauty, that's surrender. That is giving in, giving over, and sublimating yourself to something larger. And when that is something that is supposedly an actual being, it just doesn't work. It doesn't resonate with how reality functions. And that, to me, back to that bit, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. We are talking about a being that wants to rule all, claims he created all. And actually, that's a pretty good segue into well, we'll go ahead and bring up a link for it. I don't plug this book very often, but I do have another book out besides the Sorcerer's Shadow books. And that's Anarchy's Last Stand. Mostly it's fiction works, but it also has some of my essays in it. Pin that for a bit here. It's Anarchy's Last Stand, a collection of works by Sorcerer Tal. Anyways, the reason I'm plugging it right now is because we're going to talk about an essay that I put in here. And I did it pretty good. So if you'll bear with me, I'm probably just going to go ahead and read the whole thing out. It has been said that there is only one true God. Apparently, it took man creating several untrue or imperfect gods before they could design a real one. At any rate, once this one true God was eventually born, he has spent most of his time denying the existence of his forefathers. Apparently, honor thy father and thy mother only applies to mortals. I lay this question at the feet of the three great monotheists, whose individual claims to the one great truth all stem from the same source and teach a very similar, if not identical, story of creation. Another claim that they all have in common is the idea that not only is their God the one and only true God, but he is also all-knowing and all-powerful, created all life on earth, as well as the earth itself. We will ignore the question of who created God. Ignore that compared to man himself, this belief in a one true God is not exactly ancient. Instead, we will concentrate on the idea of an all-knowing, all-powerful God who is alone in the universe. In the beginning, there was God and only God. God became lonely, he created the angels. All things that existed were created by God. Now remember, God is all-knowing, not just all-powerful. So by default, he knows everything man and all his other creations are going to do. He knows when even a sparrow falls. Among the many things that God made was man, and he made man a home in the Garden of Eden. He also made an entire planet around this paradise known as the earth. In the middle of the Garden of Eden, there was a tree known as the Tree of Knowledge. And God pointed this tree out to Adam, the first man, and then told him that he wasn't even allowed to touch it, much less eat of its fruit. Now, this God is all-knowing. He knew that eventually Lucifer, his favorite angel, would grow jealous of man and convince Eve to eat of the fruit and give the fruit to Adam as well. Then, after both Adam and Eve have eaten of the fruit, God shows up, acting all surprised by man's behavior, and angrily cast man out of paradise and made him to suffer. The fact that God had already created the rest of the earth seems proof for sure that God knew what was going to happen, which is why he had the earth prepared for them. After a while of allowing man to suffer alone in the wilderness, as it were, God came down and gave man some commandments, many of which run counter to our instincts, which either God had created in man, or else allowed to become part of man when he set up Adam and Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge. Now, why would an all-powerful, all-knowing God who is alone in the universe choose to create such a scenario? There are a few possibilities. Number one, God is a sadist and has a sick sense of humor. He has created man to torment him for his own godly amusements, kind of the Gnostic philosophy. Two, despite the fact that God is all-knowing and all-powerful, he has some serious insecurity issues and needs man to prove his love of God, despite the fact that God is all-knowing and knows exactly how much every individual loves him. To prove this love, man has been made to suffer hardships and to be born without knowledge of God. If man chooses not to believe in God or is never told about God, he is punished in hell for all of eternity. Also, despite the fact that God is the one and only true God, he is a jealous God, who apparently flies into fits of rage if we choose to lavish even one small bit of affection on a false idol. 3. God is bored and lonely. This is my favorite one. This is the only one that I think this being did exist. This is the only good issues I can see. 3, God is bored and lonely and has created man and set him in a conflicting environment in the hopes of creating a being whose actions he cannot predict, someone whose thoughts he would not know beforehand. That would mean that all of creation has been a desperate attempt by God to find someone to talk to. 4, God has lied to us and did not create the earth, is not all powerful or all knowing, and if he exists, is not alone in the universe. Instead, he behaved as one who stands up in a crowded room, holding both hands over his ears, closes his eyes, and screams at the top of his lungs. All of this to convince himself that he is the only one in the room. Now, most of these scenarios do not look too favorably on this God fellow. This God sounds more like someone to be feared. Scenarios 1 and 2 seem to leave behind any real hope of salvation. What would a heaven or hell look like that was created by this either monster or madman? As I said a moment ago, scenario 3 suggests that the holiest thing man can do is rebel against God out of love for him, so that we may become something that is more than just a reflection of him. Scenario 4 makes defiance of this God almost a necessity, an escape from either an egomaniacal madman or liar. If there is only one true God, he is a psycho, and it is best to enjoy whatever small amount of time we have on earth before we are pulled completely back within his power in heaven or hell. Or God secretly wants us to rebel, making defiance the most holy and pious of all actions. So that kind of becomes a reverse Pascal's gambit, right? Because Pascal's gambit is that he believes we should behave as God is real, as if God were real, because if he is, we go to heaven. If not, then, well, that's the end of everything, And he figures that's only the two possible scenarios is basically God's real, or there is no soul. So it's a very limited argument. On the other hand, Pascal's wager. Thank you. I got it wrong. That's not his gambit, it's his wager. Pascal's wager. But yeah, it's kind of a reverse of Pascal's wager. This is, if this God is real, the only thing we can do is defy him, because it's the only things that have reasonable outcomes. Any of the scenarios, listening to this being is going to get you in more danger than where you started. So, if he did exist, the most holy and pious actions we could possibly do is be a spiritual anarchist and do our best to defy God and make our own decisions and own choices. So even if I'm wrong about everything, yeah, I actually took philosophy at Weber State. I didn't finish college because I can't do algebra, and they wouldn't give me my philosophy degree without passing the pre-algebra. Obviously, it was just a bachelor's degree, but had a lot of fun in that class. The professor that did most of it was quite obsessed with Nietzsche, though, which is fine. Nietzsche's cool. Has his good points and his bad points, I suppose. The thing I say about Nietzsche is I hate how often he's right. But he is part of what pulled me out of my own existential crisis. So there's that. So, as I said, with all any arguments for God existing, come down to, well, if he does exist, he's the bad guy. Awesome. Yeah. The entire religion is based on God fearing. It's all about fearing God, keeping God happy, doing what God says. This is no way to live, right? And then once you go up to heaven, it even says in the Bible, you're going to spend the whole time worshiping God. You spend all of your time singing his praises. And I don't know, doesn't sound like a good time to me, personally. I mean, inherently, that's the whole case against God right there. But the idea of whether the demiurge, yes, especially that first one, the scenario one where like God is sadistic and simply enjoys our suffering. That's basically the Gnostic philosophy, right? Is the demiurge created us so that we could suffer and he could feed upon that suffering to make himself more? I haven't done a whole lot. I still haven't studied much on the Gnostic philosophy. So my understanding of that particular thing is very layman. Like I said, I did spend 10 years studying the Bible real hard when I was a kid. I had the whole damn thing just about memorized for a minute there. It's kind of funny how it went because the church, supposedly non-denominational, and people started going because the preacher would just read from the Bible and not tell anybody what to say, what to think, and so that made the church real popular with people in Utah that weren't Mormon. And then as soon as he started getting real popular like that, he started telling people what to think because that's kind of how those things work, right? It's all about hierarchy. Now, as much as was talking just a little while ago about how I do believe there is an entity that was behind all of the monotheistic religions that influenced their creation. It seems like he had like wearable tulpas kind of thing for each one. Yeah. Yeah, Bible just means a collection of books. Absolutely. I actually learned that in church. But yeah, so you know, the biggest thing to me ultimately, whether I'm crazy or whether I'm not, is that all of these monotheistic religions were created. They started the same way any cult does. And really, the big difference between a cult and a religion is success, right? I mean, look at the Mormons in Utah. They were literally a doomsday cult, Latter day Saints. There's a reason they call themselves the Latter day Saints. And what keeps them from being seen as like a cult is that when it came down to their armed standoff with the government, they chickened out and didn't fire. There's actually a moment because the Mormon church declares war on the United States after the United States makes polygamy illegal. And they had just done the Mountain Meadow massacre where they killed where they killed all those people from Missouri. So the United States went right down to Utah with a whole bunch of troops. And they actually met at a place called Mormon Flat. And it's an interesting story because there are people who have gotten access to journals from people that were writing at that time. And one of the journals at the museum is from a soldier. And he's talking about how they rode through without even slowing because they were sure that the Mormons didn't have the courage of their conviction. And they were right because there is a Mormon guy that was up in the hills there. They built like a little fort in this pass. And yeah, they barely even talk about it in Utah history. They very much gloss over the fact that the Mormon church went to war with the United States. But they meet there at Mormon Flats. And like I said, they had these like a a pass, and they had two big hills on both sides, and they had built up a fort on both sides, so they had the high ground completely. And the there's a Mormon that was up in there, and his journal says, "I was ready to I was ready to fight for my religion and die for my God until I saw the line of blue, and then I realized God had other plans for me." Because I mean, like I said, they brought in all kinds of troops. They had like over 1,000 men and Gatling guns, and the Mormons, there's like 600 of them up in there, and they just, yeah, that's how the Mormonism kept from remaining a cult. Success. That's the only difference. And especially in the Old Testament, you get Abraham. That is some crazy cult stuff going on there, period. They're living in Babylon. He has a bunch of daughters and sons. One day he sees a vision of God. I don't remember exactly what Abraham's vision was. I was never all that good in the Old Testament, but either way, God tells him that I am the one true God. You are now my chosen people. There's that whole chosen people, chosen race thing in the Old Testament, which is pretty problematic as well. The idea of a chosen people, that's concerning. But either way, he then takes his family, his very large family. He was a well-to-do man there in Babylon. Oh, have I ever encountered a different deity related to pre-Nicene Christianity? No, I keep away from the Christian stuff for the most part, honestly. I had my go with it. I had 10 years, wasted 10 years in a lot of ways on that, but it gave me an understanding of certain things. So I don't actually regret having been a Baptist for 10 years, but I certainly don't waste any more time with it. So yeah, you got this guy Abraham, and he takes all of his family out into the woods. If I was one of them dudes, I married some girl, then all of a sudden her dad says, "We all got to move out into the woods, and you got to cut off part of your penis." Yeah, no, divorce, man. No way. No way. Right? So that right there, I mean, that is a cult. He took a whole bunch of people and took them out into the wilderness to start their own society away from everybody else, right? And then God tells him to sacrifice his own child, which he goes to do. And then at the last minute, God's like, "Nah, just messing with you." Here's another one. You're like, what the hell kind of God is this? What the hell kind of God does something like that to somebody? Right? There's all kinds of jerking people around in the Old Testament. Look at what's his name? Can't remember his name all of a sudden. Not too good with this stuff anymore. I used to have it a lot more memorized. The guy that God and the devil make a bet, and God lets the devil ruin his life just to prove that he loves him. I mean, what the hell? And if God's all knowing, how do you make a bet with God? Therein lies another problem. When I was Christian, though, the first thing that made me really question was the story of Legion. And this right here tells you everything. Because supposedly God is all powerful, right? In the end, once this is all over, he's going to come down, speak a word, and it's over. And God can do anything. He's omnipotent, all powerful, and so was Jesus. his avatar. Never mind, he got crucified, but I mean, supposedly he allowed that to happen. Now, what he didn't allow to happen was Legion. Legion, it's one of the stories people don't talk about much in the Bible for some reason, but it was, this was the first thing I heard as a child where I was like, but Jesus just got his ass kicked. So, Legion, Jesus is trying to go into some city or the other. And on the way there, he sees this beggar on the side of the road that's been possessed by demons. And he goes up to the guy and he's like, get out of this person, demons. And the demons are like, no. Which, if all this stuff is true, was true, that should not have been possible, right? And so Jesus like, tell me your name. And he says, for we are Legion, for we are many. And he's like, okay, Legion, leave this body. So now he's got the name even. And he tries to make them leave. Still can't banish them out. What the hell kind of God is that? Right? What? But then it gets even worse because Jesus tries again and they won't get out. And then Legion's like, I'll tell you what, dude. You tell everybody you're casting me into that swine herd over there, that herd of swine over there, and I'll go. Just make sure that you tell everybody and make it loud and clear that that's what you're doing. So he does. And then Legion, once he's in all the pigs, runs into the water and drowns all the pigs and gets Jesus cast out of the city. So he actually prevented Jesus from preaching in that city, and Jesus was forced to leave. Powerful God, most powerful God, my ass. Only God in the universe, my ass. Because these demons then should just be puppets of his. There's one thing controlled defines, but that's not controlled opposition. Read through what you're saying. I was fully paying attention. Yeah, you've mentioned David before. Yeah, that's cool. That's very cool. So, people find some interesting Paracast. Was that a podcast? Sounds a little familiar. People find weird ways around this stuff. Like I've talked about my buddy Jared before. But my buddy Jared stayed Mormon because he wanted to go to the first level of Mormon hell. Right? Like literally he went to seminary class because in Utah you can go to you can take a class amount of school to go across the street because there's always a Mormon church across the street. Go across the street and take a class at the church, and it counts towards your school. I think they're not allowed to have it count anymore, but either way. He went in there and they told him the first level of heaven where everybody went that was smoke, drink, and gamble. So he stayed Mormon just to aim for that. And I've told you the story about him telling me there was no afterlife before or after he died. I really don't feel like telling it again. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. If you want to know the story of Jared, I do have it in my videos. Saint Jared the Black. He who came back from the dead to tell us there is no afterlife. But like I say, I've told it before. And as funny as it is, it's still a good friend of mine that died. I don't feel like telling the story over again tonight. The first book on how to use Photoshop. Right on. I do think I remember the parrot cask. That seems familiar. Okay, so um what else do I have to say in the case against God? Just want to check something real quick. What's that? Oh. Okay. So, um, I mean, the whole thing just doesn't work, right? And is also too large of a grab. I think that's why the tulpa isn't able to be maintained at all without something behind it. And now that that's gone, the religions are all of them are just completely falling apart. All of the monotheistic religions are just in death throes right now, right? And it's because either A, I am correct and the horde came and removed the entity that was behind all of those religions and keeping those tulpas active, or we've simply gotten to a point where we are no longer foolish enough to believe such things, most of us. And the tulpa is losing its power. But either way, God is dead. If there ever was a God, it has died. And you can see it in how modern Christianity behaves, especially over the last 10 years or so. They're in their death throes. They're acting like a beast with his head cut off. They're trying to replace God with Donald Trump, the evangelicals, the very same people that I used to go to church with. They're all Trumpers now. And it's crazy to me because back when I was, listening to these people, they would talk about the signs of the beast. And he would have the symbol upon their forehead, and a number upon his forehead. But Romans use letters as numeral, as numbers, right? I don't know what TRUMP is in Roman numerals. I know it's not 666. Probably not all of them are even Roman numerals, really. M is, but yeah, he has a Trump shrine on his mantle. See, that's what I'm talking about. And then, like, it's these very same people because my dad is still friends with the family of when I was 5, the pretty girl that got me to go to church with her, right? Like, they're family friends. We still know these people. And yeah, they talked about watching out for the signs of the beast, the mark on the forehead, um the way he would talk even. They talk about how like he would be boastful and say things like, "Who can make war on the beast? The beast is great." That just sounds like something Trump would say. Who can make war with Trump? There's that boasting. Their God is dead and they're trying to put Trump in his place. It's the only reason that when they saw the beast come, they would embrace him. It's because they know God is dead. Yeah, that is the sign of the beast. If I was still Christian, if I still believed the words of that book, I'd be completely convinced that Trump was the beast. Well, except for one thing. The beast fixes everything in 8 years, right? He's helping build it's like he's cosplaying it though, even. He even rebuilt the embassy in Jerusalem. And then evangelical preachers said, well, that's something that happens in the Bible. Well, you know who does that in the Bible? The beast. He helps rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. And then once it's completely filled, he goes inside and declares himself God. So either these people know God is dead and are embracing the only thing they see left, or they have been biblical Satanists the whole time, waiting for the appearance of their master. Yes, the hypocrites. Yeah, and it says that he will lead most of the Christians astray, the beast, when he comes. So, like I said, if I was still a Christian, I'd be flipping out right now. I would very much think that that dude was the Antichrist, the beast. He even got shot in the ear and his ear magically came back. That doesn't, you do realize that's impossible, right? There'd be some scarring, there'd be something. This is cartilage. Even if they was to put some new material in there, there's going to be some scarring, there's going to be something. I mean, look what a poor job they do on his hand. What a poor job they do on disguising the bruise on his hand. And we're supposed to believe that they did his ear perfect, where you can't even tell there was ever anything. No. But that, people, there was even some of them comparing that, because the beast gets one of his heads cut off and he survives. Or the serpent. Oh yeah, the Christians do. They just ignore and cherry pick whatever they want. I mean, I was aware of this. I was always, even when I was a kid, when I was at church, that's part of the reason a lot of the people in church didn't like me, was because I took the Bible seriously and I'd speak up, you know, quote passages that were inconvenient at Bible camp and shit like that. They've never taken the book seriously from the very beginning. I mean, the book itself is about having, at least the King James version, Jesus was talking about having his personal relationship with him, right? And then they refused to translate the book out of Latin for like 1,000 years for people to understand that and know that's all it is, and just made up a bunch of shit. It's always been a tool of control. You know, um, and it goes beyond that. It's not just a tool; it's a weapon. And that's why they kept the people from even knowing what the words of the Bible said, because they wanted it secret. So they could just say, well, the good book says this, the good book says that. And most of the shit that's in like even modern day Catholicism, most of that shit ain't in the Bible. But even now, the people that claim they just, oh, well, we just go by what the Bible says, they clearly ignore big parts of it. You know? Like they, especially the Old Testament, your evangelical Christians, like, oh, well, you can't be gay, you can't have premarital sex, but you can eat shellfish, you can eat pork, you can wear mixed fabrics. Mixed fabrics was a big one. You're supposed to get stoned to death for that. But the ones they don't like, and then ignore that Jesus said, yeah, none of that stuff matters. And even the one that's bothered me that's another one that bothered me the whole time I was a child, was the one about women having to be modest. That's complete BS. Jesus said, If you can't fucking keep your eyes to yourself, pluck out your own eye. If you can't keep your hands to yourself, cut off your own hand. And then they try to slut shame women. When Jesus said, let the girls wear what they want and fucking treat them with respect anyways. You know, don't be grabby and handsy and staring at people and everything's fine. But they don't care about that, you know. And, you know, in the end, even the way the Bible is, because, you know, obviously after being the end of the Bible that long, I was more concerned with what I thought it said and how I understood it than I was with that damn church by the end. But even that I couldn't go along with. We're still talking about a guy that says everybody's own. We're all born guilty. We should all be thankful to God for making us suffer so that we can purge ourselves of the sin that our great however many greats grandmother and grandfather ate a fucking apple that they got set up to eat. The whole thing's bullshit. And it's a damn good thing it's not true because like I said earlier in the live, if it was, the only thing you could do is escape for as long as you possibly can. Right? In fact, in Revelations, there's that part where he's talking about after the Armageddon and everything's over, there will still be God's hand sifting through the rubble looking for the lost souls. The very last part of me believing in the Bible, that was my aim. That's exactly where I was going. I was like, all right, well then, I guess the only hope is to become a lost soul. Which, you know, considering I was already doing a bunch of magical spirit stuff that I at that point had accepted was that, I was like, okay, so then I become in tune with the earth and the rocks and the boulders so that I can get down in there after death. I mean, now I understand reincarnation is real because I remember stuff. Yeah, Paul. See, and there's another aspect. I mean, about the Bible where the modern Bible, after the Council of Nicaea, almost all the Bible is written by a guy that's never been in Jesus' presence. Starts out with him whooping the Christians' asses. And I think I've talked about this before, but I figure what happened with Paul was Saul, the guy before, you know, who Paul was before he became Paul, was he got the job of getting the Christians to stop harassing the other religions and being a real pain in the ass that they were. And he's like, so how am I going to go about this? And he started beating their ass. But they're a martyr religion, especially back then. It was all about suffering for God, you know? That was a part of the whole thing, was that literally suffering for God. So beating their ass didn't help. That's what they want. So one day he's riding to Jerusalem or wherever. I can't remember. I don't remember where he was headed any longer. But when the moment where he had the vision, was he had an epiphany. He's like, dude, if I can't whoop their ass into listening to me, then I'm just going to tell them I'm from God. The only way to control these people and make them stop going and harassing the other temples and being dicks everywhere and being a problem is to take control of the religion. So he shows up, and rather than beating their ass, he starts telling them that I'm from God, and almost all of his miracles can be explained by the Romans being in on it. You know, the cage door being unlocked is just as easy. The Romans left it open. And honestly, I've done my best to forget the Bible as much as I can, so I don't remember what all of his miracles were, but I remember going, "Now all these could be solved by the Roman soldiers being in on it and just doing what he's told." Is God really the demiurge? Um, I don't know. Uh, I don't believe there is a being that created reality. I do believe we live in a multifaceted reality, and some, well, most are essentially created by a moment that needs a decision, right? From a central core. Like energy. Okay. I talk about this all the time that, you know, it all starts on the middle plane as information. And even information itself at first was really small. It was just yes, no, things like that, just very small bits. But as that information transfers, it creates energy, which condenses into matter. But when life happened, when reality really began, when the Big Bang blew up, when the holy noise was first strung, right? It's because there became a moment in all of that where a choice had to be made. Something was going to happen, and there was no way for it to happen without something deciding what would happen. And that is where it all started. First confusing moment, that first bit of confusion, that first bit of what? And it was enough. It began. It made someone had to be perceiving it to to decide, to create. And so it became. And boom, the holy noise, the Big Bang, whatever you want to call it. I mean, a lot of the stuff that Jesus did, like especially the wine into water. What you have to understand is at the time, wine just meant drinkable water. So he just told everybody the water was okay, and they drank it. Right? He wasn't trying to party. He just was trying to make the water. He was just telling them that the water was safe. Placebo effect is probably enough to keep. If there's just bacteria in the water, placebo effect alone might be enough for that, or even maybe just everyone was lucky and the water was fine. Because at the time, they would have really strong wine that you would mix with your water to kill anything in it. It wasn't safe to drink the water, you had to drink wine. And the thing is ultimately all of the gods have been said to have powers, and Jesus's are pretty lame compared to Thor's or really anybody's. But even in the Old Testament, there's there's parts where God is proving his might over other gods. If he's the only God, what the hell are you talking about? Even in the whole bit with Egypt, you know, the Pharaoh's wise men could turn their staves into snakes too. there was all kinds of miracles going on everywhere. There's all kinds of in the Old Testament. There's all kinds of stuff of them proving their God is more powerful. What's the point proving your God is more powerful if them other gods aren't real? Yeah, exactly. It disproves the whole thing. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. He was able to turn his stuff into snakes too. All that was that Moses, yes, was a better magician than the Egyptian guys. If any of them stories are even true, you know. And there's the story of is that Baal that they're trying to get to light the altar on fire, and it's a contest between God and Baal, and God wins. But if there was a contest, I mean, what the hell? And I mean, ultimately, back to my original story with the um, what am I looking for here? Garden of Eden. There's the other option, which is actually the second thing in Christianity that I questioned. Really, that really made me question was didn't hit me the first time. That Legion story that hit me the first time. I was like, Jesus got his ass kicked. But the Garden of Eden. There is one other option. There's one other option, and that's that God didn't plant the tree. So then who did? Somebody powerful enough that he could not only stick a tree in the middle of God's garden, God couldn't pluck it. God couldn't make it leave. So what? All powerful, omniscient, omnipotent. If you're omnipotent, how come you can't get rid of that tree? Why's that tree got to be there? So either it was a setup, or you were lying from the beginning, at the very least, right? Yeah, there's definitely all kinds of weird esoteric machinery out there. Um, some of the orgone stuff I find quite interesting. However, that being said, most of the orgone stuff now they're just trying to do it with piezoelectricity, and that's not what orgone actually is. Orgone is sexual energy, right? That's why it's called orgone. So without that component, a lot of that stuff doesn't work the way it should. I mean, there's something to be said for piezoelectricity. Don't get me wrong. Using that, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but using that energy that comes from striking certain materials like skull or flint, steel. Well, flint and steel, that's a little more than that, but you know, using anything where you're getting that very little bit of just actual electricity moving through a thing. There is something to be said for that. With the orgone, they claim that the squeezing of the aluminum and copper filings inside of the fiberglass of the chamber causes that. Yes, quartz. That's one of the most famous. I mean, yeah, it does work. That's what they do. A lot of the orgone, they put quartz, aluminum filings, and copper filings in there, and then as it supposedly the squeezing is causing a constant piezoelectric charge. But originally, those there should be orgasmic energy going into that as well. If you research back into orgonite, that's where it comes from. But that doesn't make it wrong. That's part of how it's supposed to work. But people try to keep that bit out of it for some reason. Everybody's got hangups, you know? That's kind of interesting. Okay, so ow, ashed my pipe right into my hand. That was smart. A little warm. Okay, so I mean, we could sit here and tear the Bible apart all day. There's a thousand things about it and Christianity and the whole thing. I think we've made a pretty good solid case against God. So, um, like I said, spiritual anarchy revisited. Spiritual anarchy, to me, is the idea that we all have spiritual sovereignty. There is no actual hierarchy, and there is an inherent democracy within the fabric of how reality happens. And what do I mean by an inherent democracy? And didn't I just say anarchy? Well, anarchy, even anarchy, comes down to people agreeing on what happens. Like I talked about in the last slide about how democracy is it's inherent in the creation of the universe. It's all from perception. Humans are the hillbillies of the galaxy. Yeah, probably. Right? It's all what's the word I'm looking for here? Getting to the point where let's see here. What is the word I'm looking for? Anyways, we'll come back to that. Yeah, spiritual sovereignty is, that is the most inherent thing in this whole idea. But when we each have our own, we are each the center of the universe. But if we are each the center of the universe, then we each have just as much pull on how things happen, right? And no matter what is going on in any situation, especially when you're dealing with other people, it's what we've all agreed that it is going on in one way or another. I mean, like I said, there's pressures on these things that affect it, and we have politics in our world that take away from the inherent equality of democracy because like, oh, status, and this person is the one paying for stuff, and this one is, you know so people tend to, "Hey, this person's more in charge than that." There's status and all that crap that take away from the democracy of how we decide to do things in a societal level. But even reality itself, it is created by information and transfer, thoughts. It's created by people's belief and their perceptions. And if everyone perceives things, the what is going on in any one time is defined by how most people there perceive what is going on, right? But like I was saying, and even the way, even in how moments manifest, because thought is the building blocks of the we have a fate, and thoughts gather and collect around the cosmic consciousness of oh, what was it? The cosmic collective, right? The collective unconscious helps form moments because that is one of the filters that these transfers of information, these thoughts, this energy condensing into matter, into forms, one of the filters that it goes through is the collective conscious. And that is very much controlled by how much a certain thing is believed or thought about. The more a thing is believed, the more power and momentum it has in the collective consciousness. The more it gets repeated, the more it the more people that are repeating it, the more powerful it becomes. Every time a pattern is repeated, the momentum of its cycle increases, right? And so that's the weird thing about that is a lot of reality and history is precedence of votes. Or certainly could be seen that way. Democracy gonna democrate. Democracy is the demiurge. Maybe. Yeah, there's all kinds of strange things with pyramids for sure. It is an interesting phenomena. It is also just a base structure, right? It's one of the most basic power structures. It's why they last so long and why we find them all over the place. But that's also because they work. They work not just for, oh, well, this will last a long time. Because I don't think that was, I mean, the Egyptians, that was their goal, but the people that made the ziggurats and others, other places, I don't know if permanence was their biggest aim, but there's that shape. It's one of them points. It's like a cone of power, right? Like when you're doing witchcraft, often they talk about the cone of power that comes up from the circle and goes to a point above you from a broad area around the circle up to a point. It refines that energy and puts it into a point. And that's kind of what goes on with some of the stuff with the pyramids. That's part of why they are that way. I can't stop saying the word point. Okay. So, like I was saying, anarchy is the path of sovereignty, but also the path of understanding, like there is in anarchy, that everyone is sovereign, not just you. Because we can't have just one person being sovereign because then they become our sovereign, right? And that's not anarchy, that's feudalism. And feudalism is essentially fascism, or it's more accurate to say, really, that's all fascism is the return of feudalism. It's the monarchists coming back. And that's one thing I can certainly tell you from my past life memories. Kings and queens suck. Royalty, rule by royalty is not a good thing. There are much better ways to live. Not that what we have now is great, but it is what we are where we're at. And I think it's going to get better within, might get a little worse for just a minute. but it's gonna get better within this lifetime or within over time. Um, so you know, spiritual anarchy is why am I such a such a sudden loss for words? Like I said, it is the well, spiritual sovereignty. It's hard to really put a whole lot of definition into that in a way because it's different for each person. That's part of the understanding of it. And it's well, it's the natural order, right? Spiritual sovereignty and anarchy is the natural order. It's just a return to the wild. It's just a return to what is and stop ceasing to pretend that we are not all already sovereign, that we are not all already completely spiritually sovereign entities. None of us are the property of any other being. It is impossible for a being to actually own another being. We are not we are not the product or creation of any god, goddess, or anything that is not also part of us. There was a moment, like I said in the beginning, to my way of understanding, it all started with that first paradox. Something that there was a moment that could not happen, but had to happen unless a decision was made. There was a moment of confusion. There was a moment, even it was probably clear back on the informational level, probably two bits of information. I'd have to, this is the kind of thing that I could actually speak to the horde about to get more accurate information on this. But it was essentially probably two pieces of information that contradicted, finally collided, and had to be a decision made, and that caused enough confusion to spark perception to actually begin the whole process. That moment of poof, the thing that materially manifested as what we call the Big Bang or the holy noise. I prefer the holy noise to the Big Bang. But even then, we're just talking about a metaphor manifest onto the material plane. You know, there are arguments that the Big Bang itself didn't happen. That's not exactly how it went. So, I'm there is what am I trying to say here? It's a possibility that isn't how it materially manifested. Like, sounds good. It seems to be the understanding, but that first bit about how life began, that's how awareness came into being. That's how awareness comes into being. It happens in the astral plane. This is something that we have spontaneously generated beings all of the time, right? They're just things that come into being for one reason or another, some moment that happened somewhere. This is where your elementals come from, or moments within that element that kind of just started perceiving because there was a decision as to which way the water should go. And that decision became a thing, became larger, became a perception, became a thing. within the flow of the water. And once you perceive, you never leave. So those things get larger and become more cohesive and become all kinds of different things. So all souls come from somewhere, and that's where. Um, and so that's part of even the purpose of reality of reality manifesting and having all these experiences so that new confusions can take place, because that's what these are, right? This paradox, confusion, tiny bit of unexplained chaos, an undefined moment that needed to be defined in order to manifest, and that creates perception, becomes life. And there was no being that caused that. That is how things happen to function. That's the pattern that has been repeated enough times that it has the momentum to be how the whole thing works. And in that, we find that each one of these perceptions eventually becomes the center, is the center, always was the center. Um, the weight loss sigil. Yeah, you asked me about that in the comments. I would honestly suggest making your own. Like, make one from the amount of weight you want to lose. Would be one that if I was going to do something like that, I would make one either from I lose and then whatever amount that is, or even better, maybe I weigh and what your ideal weight is. Use the IW and then the numbers themselves, make a sigil out of that, and make it in the shape of like something that looks to you like losing weight, right? And then charge it by, I mean, doing exercises. If you're exercising with it, actually, okay. I mean, if you want it to be, I tell you, if you want it to just the sigil do it itself, um, well, charge it by any means that you want. Then, yeah. So yeah, so if you're doing exercises, charge the sigil with with the energy that gets built up from exercising. Okay, well there you go. You do I drop 100 pounds. Make that into a sigil. I can even like see how it could be almost formed into like maybe some barbells or something. From I drop 100 pounds, like, oh yeah, absolutely. Um, are things you can do to prevent that. Uh, like it's called a locking sigil. So I will actually, I should have brought that up before, but in the Sorcerers Guild, I don't think it happens very much because we have things in the Sorcerers Guild itself to prevent it, but we haven't charged ask for quite a while. So what you should have is a locking sigil. And what I mean by that is you make the original sigil and then you do some part of it with a little extra curve, a dot, whatever you think it is, that is essentially like taking that little piece out of an old cassette player so that nobody could record over it, right? It's just locking the intent into place so that anyone that tries to charge it with anything that's not going to be that's not going to work for that, it gets locked out. It's called a locking sigil. And it is probably advisable to use those anytime that you're doing a group charge for a sigil. I mean, it's harder for people to jinx that stuff than we think it is, but enough. It's hard enough hard enough that I usually don't bother anymore. Like back in the Yahoo chat rooms back in the day, I definitely you didn't do anything in there but leave yourself vulnerable. There was a lot of real jerks in there that booby trapped messages and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, that could work. Something like that. Yeah, there you go. If that resonates with you, I mean, it sounds good to me. And that if that resonates with you, then I mean, it's worth a try. Nice. Let's see what I do with that. Wait. Oh, cool. Yeah, I was hoping to hear some results about that. Oh, that's cool. Sure, that helps. Cool. The heck did I do with that? Uh-oh. Oh, there it is. Um, I've had some results with some stuff that I've done recently that I actually have to talk to the rest of the house before I talk about it on the YouTube channel. But I'm probably gonna have an announcement here pretty soon. Unfortunately, I can't tell. Just like I said, like I just said, I need to discuss it with the other people that live here first. Um, March of Time, you were asking about a physical manifestation. You know, one of the craziest things that has ever happened to me, and I still can't explain it. Now, in my defense, I was super drunk. Yeah, like that makes it better. Anyways, I was up in Maine. I was 23 years old at the time. And I was living in a hotel room because of the way things had worked out. And I'm in this little tiny town of Lubeck, Maine, like 500 people. And so, anyways, I'm at the bar that night. And nice thing about being in a small town like that is the bartender drives everybody home at the end of the night. Like she would literally load all of us drunk dumbasses into her car and drive us all home because she knew us all. It's a small town. Anyways, she takes me home, drops me off, and I don't know why you needed to know any of that in this story because none of that really mattered. I go up the stairs into my hotel room. I walk into my room, and suddenly I'm holding this ring and pulling it and stretching it and pushing it and pulling it. And like in the middle of my hotel room, I'm just like, I didn't know where it come from. I didn't know what it was, but it's there and I'm pulling it, stretching it, pulling it. I'm like, okay, I gotta keep it open this long. I gotta keep it open for this certain amount of time. And it turns out I was letting somebody through, but I'm holding this thing, I'm just holding it, got it there like that. And then finally I couldn't hold it anymore and snap. And I could feel it suck out of my hands. And there was such an endothermic reaction from the amount of energy that just suddenly got pulled from the room that there was literally ice that formed on the wall. And that mark from the ice that had formed in that moment, like it left a water damage on the wall, that was there the rest of the time I lived in that hotel room. In fact, my aunt, somehow the guy that owned the hotel thought he could sue my aunt for when I was there. And part of the things he complained about was he claimed that I had damaged the drywall. And like I said, I seemed that I was helping someone get through that was actually born around that time. And yeah. Anyways, yeah, I just was pulling, and it just I could feel it snap right out of my hands. That was a very physical manifestation. Um, there have been other things, but that was intense. That was really strange. I coughed a moth up once, like actually, and a moth came out of my throat. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but that was an odd one. Both of those were quite a long time ago. Um, anyways, yeah, it was weird. I went to jail once for marijuana when I was young. And that wasn't the only weird thing that happened. The first one, I halfway think maybe the cops were messing with me. But like I said, I was just in there for marijuana. I hadn't done anything all that horrible. You know, I mean, I still smoke marijuana. I live somewhere where it's legal now. You know. Anyways, when I was in there, I had a grasshopper appear in my cell when they were doing the contraband when they were doing a contraband check. And there was no outside. There was like a room that didn't have a floor, like four brick walls and no ceiling, and that was the outside. And then I was in a locked room, and then there's a locked room between that and a hallway with another locked room into our area, into my cell, and then I have my pillowcase tied in a knot because I was trying to get my pillow tight enough, and then another knot inside of that. Either way, they're checking for contraband. Of course, they see all these knots in my pillow, and they undid the first knot, undid the second knot. As they undid the second knot, goddamn grasshopper jumped out of there. And then a few days later, I got out of jail and coughed up a moth. Oh, that got me trying to think about what all material things have happened. There's actually been a lot. Um, when I was working with Antbon, he actually jumped into a doll that I had in a closed box in a cupboard that I had actually got like, oh, maybe this be a collector's item, right? So he was in there, or the doll was in a closed box in a cupboard, and all of a sudden I felt a presence, and that goddamn doll landed right in front of my altar, out of the box, just boom, there he is. And that's one of them spirits, like I said, this one I didn't enjoy working with them. They're a very malignant spirit, malfeasant. They're a very malfeasant spirit, and it's definitely from a closed tradition that I don't really have any business in. But somebody tried to send him to me or something. They'll sound, "Boom, there he is," and I had to deal with him for almost a year because there he was. Can't really just get rid of him, not easily, and like I mean, I could have, certainly could have banished and banished and banished and fought, but instead, we dealt with each other for the period of time he was in my life. And then there's all the stuff with the water elemental. Anyways, I'm not going to sit here and list off all the physical manifestations. There have been things. A real physical manifestation is fairly rare, though. Getting out of a cocoon. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Like I said, I was in jail. I was in there for almost 2 weeks. Went almost insane. Oof. Well, more insane than I already am. I'm not designed to be locked in a cage. Did not work well for me. Anyways, so, you know, that actually kind of goes back to that idea of, I mean, literally, all of that happened because of the same thing that I'm smoking here now. Laws didn't change whether or not I would be smoked, whether or not that would happen. The CIA has been up to some crazy stuff over the years, that's for sure. The Unabomber was apparently a victim of MK Ultra. Like they slipped him some acid at one point or something. I don't know the full story, but they really did do things to people. When I was in high school, all of me and my friends were pretty convinced there was somebody watching us. We called them the White Van. There was some weird stuff happened there. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. There were a few things that happened that I was like, maybe this is real. But just because you and that's one thing. Another thing I've learned is just because you and your group of friends think something's real, does not necessarily mean it's real. And while we're on the subject of spiritual anarchy, it's a subject we're supposed to be on, uh, one of the most important things there is just because something says it's a god doesn't mean you have to do what it says, right? And this is for any gods. Like, I am not against working with gods as long as that god doesn't expect you to treat them like they're above you. You know, you are simply working with them. They are not something that should be giving you commandments or making str- uh, stronger and stronger demands of things that are too much, right? You need to negotiate, you need to establish rapport. The more you treat the beings like an equal, the better off you're going to be. And those gods that won't accept that are not gods that have your best interest in mind. There are ones that are trying to teach you. Understand this. That is only what I just said about making demands on you is different than pushing you, right? Sometimes when you ask a God to lead you somewhere, the path may be hard. And this does not necessarily mean that that God is a bad God, one that is trying to control you. Um, you know, there's a can almost be a fine line at times there. I don't believe that anything should be worshipped, but there are many things that are worthy of reverence, right? And there are beings that know more about a certain thing than you. And sometimes, if you have asked to learn about this thing, that not all those lessons are going to be easy. So, I'm not saying that we should never work with gods that can be rough, right? But again, just like if you asked a teacher to teach you something and the teacher starts being cruel and abusive, don't put up with that from a god either. Teacher, God, don't put that with that from anyone. Anyone that decides to be that needs to be cruel or abusive does not have the wisdom to be a teacher. They have already failed you, shown that they are not what you were looking for. You should not tolerate these things. Gods or any authority figure, any kind. In fact, we shouldn't tolerate the idea of authority figures and the idea of ones that have a right to tell you what to do. Now, authority, yes, in I'm an authority on this subject. Yeah, that exists. It's the words. What is the words? Add a little more juice to this. Um, I wish I had a little more to say on this thing about spiritual anarchy. I mean, I have lots of thoughts, but it's one of them things that in a lot of ways you're just repeating yourself. I feel like I'm just wind up repeating myself a lot in different ways, like, rephrasing the same idea, like we're trying to find something more there. There's a understanding behind the words that we're trying to dig down into, right? It's there, but the words around it aren't quite forming the shape of what we're looking for here. There's the understanding of spiritual sovereignty that we are each individual aspects and facets of the universe in the center of an infinite web. And therefore, if there is a God, it is I. It is you. It is every perceiving awareness. It is that bug that flew, like, we get some moths in here. It was that moth that flew out of my mouth. It was the back, you know, everything that perceives has its backstory, has its weave, has its web within the tapestry. Each part is important. Each part is the very center because the entire weaving is infinite and has no center except for that which is perceived. And each one of us perceives ourselves as the center. And this is how anarchy becomes democracy in a spiritual sense, becomes that weaving of threads, each of us turning our own twists upon the tapestry of reality. And each one has its pull, has its pattern, has its repetition of momentum that it creates with its movement. And each is as necessary as the other for the tapestry to form properly. The threads, however, tend to get tied up when we have things like gods that try to influence and control the free will of others, try to contain and conform other people's creativity into chains of servitude rather than the change of constant creation and self expression, the movement of every moment. And the reason for this, the reason they want to squeeze that from us is because making ourselves smaller, making us smaller makes them feel larger. And in the greater context, there is there are other beings like that being that was behind the creation of monotheism in this reality. And what they desire is for the audience to stop dreaming, to stop having its own desires, to so that they can control and contain and consume a larger portion of the audience and affect the vote, if you will. Rig the vote of how things go by keeping less people in a reality's fuller self from interacting with that reality, right? Think of it as if we are all, like I said before, in the eternal now. We'll eventually make it to that moment that is outside of time. And we're interacting with the moment we are having now. There are beings that want us to ignore our avatar in a certain reality so that they can pull that energy to them so that they can, I don't know, I guess that's how they find their entertainment in the whole thing. And I'm hoping that part makes sense. But it's part of the reason the next book club is going to be the never ending stories because he talks this, they talk about it in there, not in the idea of the horde, obviously, but the nothing that is in the book, and the people losing their creativity and conforming and giving their power over to something else. Well, he doesn't talk about that so much as just losing your power by giving up on your wishes and dreams. There are those that wish to control that. And in this reality, at this point, there's tulpas, right? We have taken out that thing behind all of that. And what we're seeing now is the death throes of monotheistic tulpas that are no longer even connected to each other in the way they were before. And that part of our problems is gonna be over fairly soon. Not all of it, but some of that political stuff. Like we definitely need to be on our guard, and you know, if we just if we don't do anything about it, maybe it won't. But these are death throes that we are seeing in the world, and realigning with the inherent reality of self sovereignty of all beings. I do believe we're getting back to it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take an intermission. Be back in a moment. Okay, I'm back. So, what I'm saying is essentially there is a driving force in the universe that keeps that resonates with the idea of us all being playable characters, with us all of us playing our characters. But there is a thing which is no longer in this reality at this moment, but there was that wanted everyone to be NPCs, right? Wanted everyone to stop playing their characters and just put them on, let them be on automatic mode, so that they can gain that much of their power. Anyways, that's a you know stuff about the horde essentially, which I have had other people have interactions with people in the horde, like Black Unigriff, for example, on the live. And I've even met a few people that knew about the horde independently of me, which has surprised me. Well, it always surprises me when that happens. Anyways, um, it's been kind of a long week. I don't think I'm gonna make it to the 3 hour mark. In fact, I think I'm gonna go ahead and call it here at the 2 hour mark. So about 10 minutes. I'm probably gonna go ahead and call it for tonight. So at this point, we'll open the floor up to comments, questions, or and concerns. And unless I go off on another tangent about something, yeah, our minds are mingling on here, and that's you know, people that I interact with, they become aware of as well. Oh, thank you very much, Peter Griffin. Yes, I do feel like we're gathering up a quite a nice group here in our afterlife personal realms. Yes, absolutely. I mean, the strange thing about that is when you create entire pocket realities that are escapes, you can have things in there become so self-aware that it becomes essentially its own reality inside of the pocket reality. So yes, but it can get strange if you make a really complicated personal pocket reality. And yes, Rome said you absolutely can. We'll have that ready for next week. Um yes, Felix does have many interesting thoughts. They are it's been a lot of fun being married to Felix. Not quite following what you're saying there, March of Time. Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of many different cosmoses built many different ways, and about the pocket realities. I mean, that's I'm not saying don't do it, but I am saying that if you have your your platform, like essentially what you've done is created a dream platform and made it into a pocket reality. But once you start creating beings in there, they're essentially tulpas. Well, I mean, that can get condensed down to the point where you've got your own material realm in there. So, yes, you can do that, but understand that once you do that, if you start getting a whole environment and like web of life going on in there, your pocket reality will eventually become inhabited. You know, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. And then you wind up with your own moral quandaries about what to do with such things as it becomes something beyond you. Or you can find a way to open it up, or I don't know. I've never gone that far with the pocket reality of to where it's like, well, now I have this whole planet with all these beings and they're living their own lives completely unconnected to me. Probably take you more than one life and death sequence to get it that intense, anyways. You know, more than one incarnation reincarnation cycle. Um, That being said, we could probably talk about. Well, that'd probably be better for a video, but I could probably do a video on pocket realities fairly soon. I suppose I should plug my channel. It's 99 cents a month to get a regular membership, or you get the fun little emojis. I'll do one of Ask for Us this time. Hail Ask for Us. You can access the wills of those realms, but they are basically similar to the Force from Star Wars. Oh, yeah, there's definitely a realm of force, and there's definitely a momentum and realm of force behind each one of the runes. Their form of each of the force behind the runes is the rune itself. I really need to have Felix make me some better emojis. I'm not very good at that. But anyways, yeah, 99 cents a month for that. 9.99 for 9.99 a month. You get free reading like Romstead's doing, and that can be done on the channel or in private. If it's done in private, it probably won't be on a video call like this, though. It'll probably be you ask me the questions, and then I actually do pictures with circles and arrows next to them explaining what each part of the reading is. And you can get that once a month. Or no, 9.99 is a cord cutting. And then the one above that, the one Romstead is on, you get the one reading per month, which can be done on here. The cord cuttings or stick breakings, like I said, that can be extremely, the cord cutting once a month can be extremely useful for any of us that are working with clientele. But, anyways, that's enough trying to plug my stuff there. Can we create our pocket realms using daydreams if we're having a hard time entering into lucid dream? Oh, absolutely. Um, that is the beginning step. If that's what you're at, start there. There is nothing wrong with the power of daydreams. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, so I guess 19.99, yeah, is the next one. I can never remember the price of my membership tiers. Try to plug in. I don't know what I'm talking, and I always forget what the benefits are. Well, I know what the benefits are, but the pricing. Anyways, while I'm plugging stuff, the pinned link is for the book Anarchy's Last Stand. The essay I read tonight was from the book. It's got um, some short stories. First one being Anarchy's Last Stand. It's got a novella, some poems, a couple essays. The one that obviously, like the one I read out. Um, Entering the Eye of the Storm. Let's see. Maybe we'll read a poem. We'll read it. Not the Serpent in the Garden. Probably. Let's see. Oh, I was thinking about talking about Cortad soon. I don't know about that though. Okay, that one I've read before. Let's not do one I've read, but we'll read a poem real quick. New one. Not long live Cortad. The portrait. Draw me a portrait of the artistry that is our lives, each paint a master stroke on a constantly changing canvas, each soul a pigment and a picture unto itself, a vast conspiracy of brilliance as these colors combine to form the pattern and hue of our daily lives. Anyways, So yeah, some essays, some mediocre poetry, and the first part of a novel that I'm writing, which is actually about a community of spiritual anarchists, essentially, like feral beings that have lived that way for a long time, and one of their children gets kidnapped by what appears to be humans, essentially. Oh, YouTube is doing a month free promo on the first two tiers right now. That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's a lot easier to write a book with Amazon being a thing, that's for sure. Um, I have the three out at the moment: Sorcerer's Shadow Volume One and Volume Two, and then Anarchy's Last Stand, which is just named after the first story. Which that one I've actually read before. Um, that particular story is something that I do believe may have been actually one of my own past lives. But soon I'm going to be writing a book about the backward tales of Joshua Wittershins, and that's going to be part of Joshua Wittershin's creation process. Is well, he's mentioned in he's a character in this book as well. Like I said, he's been a character in quite a few things. I can't remember what the heck the name of the Faerun Saga. It's also got the story of the Demon's Child, at least part of it. Those will come together. It'll all form together in future volumes if enough people buy them to continue to convince me. No, Bezos doesn't own the concept, and I need to quit using Amazon for this. But it's so easy to put links for YouTube on the Amazon thing. Okay. Well, um, five-sided lantern thing. Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. Probably this, yeah. Let's see. Oh, it doesn't short out something. It's a little like I don't know what you want to call it. It puts patterns on the wall, like if I have all the lights off. But that'd be a pretty much that'd be kind of a pain in the butt right now. Oh, actually, you know what? Just a second. Suppose there'll be sunlight from it. Yeah, if I can see. Okay. Yeah, that's what it looks like. You can kind of see the patterns on me. I was hoping you'd be able to see it on the walls, but the walls behind me are not white enough for that. That's the thing. Like I said, it makes patterns on the walls. It's kind of fun. I have some thoughts of turning that into a chaosphere, like we was reading about in Library, because it's a little psychedelic glowing orb seems rather apropos to me, but I haven't decided on whether I want to actually do that or not. It looks a lot better back there without that light on, I think. I should probably turn that off for the lights. It's a grow light that's just kind of feeding my money spell. There's not much alive in either one of those tanks right now. So, anyways, um, yeah, like I said, it's been kind of a long week. Uh, yeah, it does certainly create a mood. You like the background aquarium light? All right, well, we can turn it back on. It's actually technically still on. It's just I unplugged the light part. Eventually, there'll be some plants growing back there on the table. I just haven't decided what. There is a lot going on back there. Longevity versus energy. Oh, longevity via energy. You know, I've been telling my body that it needs to start rejuvenating. Felix claims I'm growing some new hairs up there. I can kind of see one in the thing there. That'd be quite the thing. I'm certainly not trying to claim I'm going to grow my hair back, but I'm telling my body to rejuvenate, and it does seem like it might be creeping up there a little. That'd be wild. Not something I'm actually focusing on. Like, I'm more concerned with my joints working better. But ironically, my knees are better now than they was when I was a kid. Well, after 14 and I did that spell where I cursed myself because I was a dumbass. But they do magic with modifying their hair via energy. Yeah, I don't think that Max is on here tonight because they haven't been talking if they are here. Yeah, Max must have missed it, but they have grown some facial hair through manifesting, like just by putting energy into that being. Well, I don't know exactly how they're doing it. I wouldn't want to speak for them, but they were talking about it on their channel. I think they mentioned it in the chat as well. I did when I was younger try to use walnut oil with intent to try and get my hair come back, and it kind of started to. But walnut oil, when you're trying to make your own, it's such a process. I don't know if it would have worked or not because I gave up on trying to squeeze walnut oil every day. When I had a walnut tree in the backyard, so I was getting literally fresh walnuts. Oh, it's a lot of work. Decided I didn't need hair that bad. So yeah, let's see. Personal updates that I can talk about. Um, Not much to report, really. Went fishing today. Felix caught a fish. I didn't catch anything, but that's all right. I'm just glad somebody got a fish. We went to a new place. The area is called Dragon's Den on Dragon's Lane. It's kind of fun. Um, Yeah. So, um, yeah, spiritual anarchy is an important concept, but like I said, there's a lot of digging around the idea with words without really getting that grasping of it out there. But that's the most important thing. To truly understand that you have self sovereignty. That is the key thing. I know I talk about how it's magic is different for everyone, but that one feature, guarantee that needs to be part of your paradigm. What kind of fish were you after? We're mostly targeting ling cod, but we catch a lot of rockfish and greenlings. We did find a beautiful spot. Yeah, no sea monkeys. Those are actually in the Great Salt Lake, where I'm from in Utah. That's where almost all the sea monkeys in the world come from. They get them out of the Great Salt Lake. Brine shrimp. They're in really salty water. I've used them in my sport quite a few times with the altar servitor tanks because they bloom, right? If you put a whole lot of eggs, they just bloom, and now there's a whole bunch of life force energy processing through the tank. And a lot of my servitor tanks, that's the main thing I'm going for is just that energy, that life force of the living beings to feed the altar servitor, which is now manifesting into Joshua Wittershins over here. So all that stuff's being connected over all this time. Yeah, well, it is pretty much like that's the only thing in it is sea monkeys or brine shrimp. They're just little bugs. There's that in there, and then some of the places where there's a little bit of fresh water, there you'll sometimes see some carp, maybe. But for the most part, yeah, it's a dead lake filled with little tiny bugs. It used to be one of the biggest flyways in the world, like for migrating birds. But the Mormons, when they got here, they killed quite a bit of it when they first got here, simply because, well, like I said, they were doomsday cult. So they had to kill a bunch of stuff to smoke it and preserve it because they thought the end of the world was coming. And then when it really got bad, though, was during the Great Depression. They just took Gatling guns out there and were just blasting all the ducks to feed people and stuff, I guess. But there's a museum out there talking about it, and there's guys standing there, big grin on their face, freaking piles of dead ducks behind them. Now, don't get me wrong, I actually am a hunter, even, but there's no call for that. There's no call for that. Even if the depression was going on, I mean, there was food rotting on. It was never about there not being enough food. Because I've talked to quite a few old people that were alive during the depression that were lived in small towns, and they're like, I had all this food and it just rotted on the vine because there was no money to take it there. So it got to be more expensive to shoot all the goddamn ducks and ship them out. That was going to rich people, they weren't to poor people eating getting ducks. It was just dirty and destroyed one of the biggest flyways in the world, actually. And that's what happens when religions take over, right? That's what, especially like, well, when a cult gets big enough to become a religion, they do all kinds of damage. And even that one's a branch off of that same monotheistic madness. Almost all the atrocities in the world were committed by or motivated by monotheism, or at least used as an excuse, you know, for the atrocity. That's just Spiritual anarchy is the only rational answer. It's the only thing that has real meaning. All these other things, these ideas of religion, you know, they aren't getting you anywhere long term. Not with this going to worship this God. You know, it seems like Christians get reincarnated too. They don't get stuck up there forever. They don't get to stay there and worship God forever. Eventually, they get reincarnated too. And even the Buddhists, like their idea of nirvana, right? Honestly, seems to me like a step just before becoming part of the audience. It's not an escape. It's And if it isn't that, and it's just simply completely letting go of your whole ego and becoming nothing but perception, you're not going to stay there forever. You're going to wind up coming back out. Like, this, the only way. Oh, I'm going to use the words, even though the only salvation is to find your own, is to find your free will, to get control of your own reality and shape and form what comes next. To weave your own fate is the only real salvation that is achievable. And we should not do this as an attempt to point towards perfection, but rather create self expression to further the growth and beauty and excitement, experience of the cosmos, right? That's what it's all about. Place energy into their bone marrow. I feel like I did as a kid when I was having growing pains. I had severe growing pains as a kid. Oh, I think I'd be bigger. Um, let's see. Yeah, that there's not much more mining I can do with the words for it about it for tonight. Um, I feel like it's been a good live, but I've had a long week. Hopefully, I'll have more to report on. Oh, this Wednesday we will be going live. We're going to be dyeing the robe, talking about the importance of wizardry attire, whatever you want to call it. The importance of looking the part. The importance of looking the part when performing magic. And I will have a link to the Never-Ending Story, which I will have put in CMU, and maybe I'll have like someone else put it in the comments of the live itself. I'm not sure. Well, I'll find out what I can get away with that copyright wise for sure. But either way, I'll provide access to a link to the Never-Ending Story, and I'll know how much of it we're going to read. Because after that, we're going to start the series on the book club of treating the Never-Ending Story as an occult book, reading the occult meaning behind the Never-Ending Story, which I'm pretty excited about. It's going to be a lot of fun. Uh, I'm also be talking about Michael, I believe it was Engel, the guy that wrote the Never-Ending Story. He actually hated the movie so much that he had his name removed from the credits. Might have his last name wrong a little bit. I'll have to make sure. Although I'll know for sure by Wednesday. So we'll be live next Wednesday. I'm gonna probably drink a little more than usual, and we're gonna dye a robe. Talk about Michael Engel and the importance of looking the. We're also gonna talk about the importance of looking the part because we're gonna have the cloak, and that sounds almost kind of posery, but the law of aesthetics is a thing. And when you take on a role, it's important to dress for that role. Anyways, that's what I'm going to call it for tonight. So, bright blessings and an interesting fate. This has been Sorcerer Tal.